Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Galuzzo. I am Riverlife President and CEO, and it is wonderful to see so many of you here tonight and thrilled to share in this process. We actually have 351 people registered for this presentation tonight, which is just phenomenal. Tonight is really, in large part, a reflection of what many of you have shared with us as your priorities for Riverfront experience. And I can't wait to share some of our preliminary recommendations and get your feedback. Tonight, I am joined by Christine Mondor of Evolve Environment Architecture, our key planning partner and consultant over the past year. Christine, thanks for joining us. Before we begin, I just wanted to do a few housekeeping items. First, please put your questions in the question box. We will be answering them following the presentation. Also, feel free to upvote questions if someone else shares your issue of interest. Another point, while many of the ideas presented tonight will look like finished concepts, we still need your input to shape their future and our priorities for implementing them. We will email you a link to a feedback survey following this presentation, so please look for that. And if you didn't register via Zoom or provide your email address, the survey link will be available after this presentation at riverlifepgh.org/loop. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on the proposals you're about to see. Also, a reminder that this presentation is being recorded, and we'll be sharing this recording widely for those who were unavailable to join today. So that's the housekeeping. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the places that we all cherish, the spaces and moments that define this region. Riverlife is the steward of the vision for our riverfront experience in all of its dynamic, urban, and awe-inspiring goodness. And we take that responsibility very seriously. Thank you, all of you, for allowing us to lead and for allowing us to share in this journey. I'm going to do a little bit of table setting for tonight's presentation. There are so many reasons to be excited about the future of our riverfronts. The riverfronts are teeming with economic activity. And folks, as we've learned over the past 6 months, are clamoring for, or dare I say, demanding a world-class experience. That's emboldened us to think really strongly about our future. Organizationally, Riverlife is at an important moment, possibly its most important moment. We've got considerable momentum, building on the legacy of our founders and predecessors, expanding our capacity and organizational infrastructure, and conducting this study, an intensive regional plan. 20 years after creating the first public vision for the redevelopment of the riverfronts, we're taking stock of what's been done, what needs to be done to address the remaining gaps in the system, and how to improve the riverfront experience so that it is equitably enjoyed by everyone. And so tonight we'll be sharing a presentation of some of our findings, our updated organizational orientation to meet 21st century challenges, as well as, and perhaps the most exciting part, some of the key transformative projects we aim to undertake in the coming years to ensure that these riverfronts are for all. Our plans are bold, they're aspirational, and they're achievable. We're incredibly excited about where we're headed, and we hope that you share our enthusiasm. With that, Christine, I think we can go ahead with our presentation.
Okay, welcome everybody. We're really excited to have you here tonight. The work that you're going to see, like Matt said, is work that's reflective of many of the ideas and aspirations that we've heard, and it's still always a work in progress. So we really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to our conversation. So with that, let's get started.
I'm so glad you could join us for this Completing the Loop virtual presentation. Our staff team and our project partners at Evolve are so excited to share these ideas with you, ideas that wouldn't have been possible without your support and feedback over the past several months as we've conducted this extensive planning and public engagement process. This presentation is the culmination of months of data and human-driven research. Funding for our Completing the Loop initiative was generously provided by the Henry L. Hillman Foundation, Riverlife, and the Environmental Stewardship Fund, a grant program of the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Bureau of Recreation and Conservation. We can't thank them enough for supporting this effort. A little context. Riverlife was formed 20 years ago as a public partnership of community members, property owners, environmentalists, and philanthropists who saw the pressing need to develop a plan to reclaim Pittsburgh's underutilized riverfronts for the people of the region and our visitors. We're a 501c3 mission-based nonprofit that works across partnerships to create, activate, and celebrate Pittsburgh's riverfronts, connecting people to exceptional places and experiences. Over the past year at Riverlife, we've taken a deep look at our mission, our vision, and our values, and how they would shape our work moving forward. With the leadership of our board of directors and staff, we undertook an extensive strategic process, which resulted in these statements of who we are and what we value. There's a lot here, but the leading principle is that we believe the region's riverfronts belong to everyone, and the benefits of these shared assets and improvements must accrue to all Pittsburghers. We're incredibly proud of these statements. They put important ideas like social equity and partnerships and collaboration front and center. And they articulate the unique and important value proposition for the organization at the intersection of economic development, arts and culture, and sustainability. Overall, these statements put people at the center, with the clear declaration that our work should ensure that the riverfronts belong to people and that they connect people. With the mission and vision and values as our backdrop, our work is focused on three basic overarching goals. The first is completing and enhancing the riverfront loop, which we'll talk about extensively in a moment. The second is expanding the loop to adjacent and specific geographies where we are an invited partner. In order to live out our values and our mission, we need to partner with communities adjacent to the loop competently to advance shared vision around open spaces. The third goal is engaging mission critical issues, and this is actually critical. Riverlife will intentionally expand its lens to address issues of regional significance that impact the loop but may extend beyond the loop, giving us the explicit mandate to lead, partner, support, and advocate on issues like water quality, stormwater infrastructure, bank stabilization, and a host of key issues. You know, we've spent the entirety of 2020 working on plans that we're discussing today. And all of this work has been colored by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been difficult in so many ways for so many people. Through it all, we've seen a real appreciation and demand for riverfront public open spaces from the people of our region. During the toughest times of this year, we saw record numbers of people turning to the riverfront trails, parks, watercraft areas for wellness and recreation. It has reinforced the importance of our work and the urgency to push forward aggressively with our shared vision. Riverlife has been working in this space with many partners for many years. In addition to a host of public and philanthropic visionaries, I'd be remiss to not mention the literal trailblazing efforts of our nonprofit partners, Friends of the Riverfront, Venture Outdoors, the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy, the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, and many, many more. Each organization has its own area of emphasis and special role in the reclamation of our region's riverfronts. And many of our goals are aligned. We found that when we work together, we can create huge advancements and capital improvements, recreation, wellness, and the environment for the people of this region. Over the last 2 decades, Riverlife has been working with many of these partners to transform Pittsburgh's riverfronts and connect people back to the water, spearheading visionary plans and tactical master plans that have guided over $132 million in investment into Pittsburgh's riverfront areas and changing the green front door of the city. You've been hearing a lot about completing the loop from us. And you may be asking yourself, did I miss something? What's the loop? Where's the loop? How do I get on it? Don't worry. The loop is a working term we've created specifically for this process to describe our riverfront open spaces and parks and trails and how they might be knitted together to create a contiguous and connected world-class experience. This loop concept is actually rooted in our history as an organization, and it's going to be central to our goals moving forward. When Riverlife was founded back in 1999, our first big initiative was to create a community-driven master plan for downtown riverfront open space between the West End Bridge, the 16th Street Bridge, and Smithfield Street bridges, complementing the growing trail system that was being developed by the city of Pittsburgh and Friends of the Riverfront. As parks and trails within that area were successfully built and connected, we expanded the boundaries up to the 31st Street Bridge in the Strip and the Hot Meadow Bridge near Southside Works. All in all, that wishbone-shaped loop represents over 15 miles and 1,000 plus acres of public open space. Much of that riverfront necklace of parks and trails and open space is constructed and connected, but there are significant gaps in the experience, a dearth of amenities, failing infrastructure, and significant needs for comprehensive care and maintenance. And so this is where our completing the loop conversation picked up last year. And this process, our shared process, has been informed and enriched by you. During the past several months, Riverlife has led a public process of stakeholder interviews, community input gathering, and deep dives into specific project node challenges and solutions. Over 3,600 people participated in our online story map, which evaluated each riverfront experience within this loop area, giving us rich feedback on site conditions and priorities for improvements. Our collaborators during this process, Evolve Environment Architecture, is a Pittsburgh-based planning and design firm. They are truly big thinkers that care immensely about the future of this region. We are incredibly grateful for their partnership in building this effort. And with that, I'm pleased to turn things over to Christine Mondor, a friend and principal with Evolve, who will walk us through our findings and show you a preview of some of the really exciting prescriptions for completing Pittsburgh's Loop riverfront experience. Christine?
Thank you, Matt. Today, I'm pleased to share Riverlife's vision for Pittsburgh's rivers. I'm going to share with you a little background information and then some of the ideas and designs that have come out of the community process. Riverlife's process is based on a data-rich gathering of information, and the team has been on the ground looking at 25 different river segments that are grouped into 9 districts. For each of those districts, the team has looked at 5 different categories: connectivity, place, ecology, maintenance, and experience, to understand how well the river is connected, what the quality of our places are, what kinds of ecological systems are in place, how it's maintained, and the experience of that place. The results have come in with lots of spreadsheets and rich data and evaluations and rankings, and ultimately an understanding of the gaps of where we can do better. Each segment in all the rivers has been evaluated according to these categories and ranked. And those rankings have led us to understand that some places are doing pretty well and other places need a lot of work. We've been able to identify 4 different priority areas, both as districts and as specific projects: the West End Bridge Gap, the Strip District, the River Avenue Corridor District, and the Southside District. And you'll hear more on these areas today because a lot of focus has been given on how to address these areas. We know there's still a lot of work to do, and these are some of the images of places that hopefully will be great in the next few years, but right now need some work. And so the prescription for what that work is has come through ideas from the community process as well as this data. So what is the vision for the river tomorrow? Our rivers connect people to nature. They connect people to great riverfront places. They connect people to riverfront programs and activities. And our rivers should connect to Pittsburgh's neighborhoods. And ultimately, the rivers need to be understood as part of a cohesive experience. And what is it that defines a cohesive experience for the rivers? Well, what we heard were things like, we'd like to get to the river safely. There's a lot to learn along Pittsburgh's rivers. The view of the point is world class. And there are always new things to discover. So through this series of before and after pictures, we hear things that people would like to see on our rivers, and we've taken the past few months to imagine what those things might be. It begins with amenities and programming, and while that sounds somewhat abstract, let me try to tell you what that actually means. A cohesive river experience should have amenities along all parts of the loop, all parts of the riverfront. Sometimes those will be large amenities, sometimes small amenities, but they should be consistent across the loop. The loop at its best will also have catalytic programming. Will be programming that appeals to everyone, large events, small events, things that are master planned and things that people can do themselves. So what are some of these things? Loop amenities range from furniture, trailheads, ecological restoration, rest areas, lighting, public art, air quality monitors, and connections back to the neighborhoods through green streets or connections along the rivers with trails. And so, for instance, today, if we were to look at trailheads that exist, these are places where you can park and get on the trail, where there might be signage or something else to tell you the trail exists. These are places where it's in some part there today. But if we want to think about in the future, what is an equitable and accessible way to get to the trail and the riverfront, we would look for places where we would fill gaps and put trailheads in where they don't currently exist, as well as fix up the trailheads that do exist. Same thing with landings. If a trailhead is a place that you shift from one mode of transportation, a car to a bike or to walking, a landing is also the same thing where you shift from land to water. And so what makes a cohesive river experience right now, in terms of getting on the water, there are a few places that you can do that. But what we'd really like to see are more places and equitably distributed so that more people can get to the river as well as on the river. Likewise, catalytic programming on the water and on the shore means things that are events or temporary installations as well as long-term programs. So for instance, we all know Pittsburgh loves its festivals and things like art walks and food trucks. Those are great things to start with, but also temporary installations of things that are specific to the river, like swings and furnishings, or thinking about neighborhood loops, which I'll tell you a little more about. Informal performances, pop-up events, fishing competitions, all those things make the river special, as well as long-term programming like interactive water features or recreational barges or other things that partners and friends of Riverlife might be partaking in their projects and would be really fantastic to have as part of our full river experience as a city. So for instance, the term neighborhood loops means that you might spend a day trip, not just going up and down the river, but going along the river for a bit and taking a detour, if you will, in through the north side and through Manchester. Or you might take a loop around, a little mini loop around the point, and also go see some of the great green spaces and parks that we have in downtown Pittsburgh. We can do this along the Strip District, along River Avenue, along the South Side, and along Mount Washington. And I'm sure there are many more that we would like to see as possible ways that people see Pittsburgh's great neighborhoods through the lens of the rivers. And of course, things like fishing competitions, which we don't think of that frequently, you know, where people go to fish. We know that there are places where this happens now. an organized event or something that has happened in the past and others could happen in the future, we would like to see distributed up and down the rivers and perhaps even become a kind of year-long sequence of events. These are some of the types of programming that Riverlife or its partners would like to contribute to Pittsburgh's rivers to make a cohesive experience. River rooms and essential projects. What is a river room? A river room is an area of the river that has a relationship between both sides of the river, has a relationship to places up and down the river, where people began to think of it as a destination. We all know that the area around Point State Park in the North Shore is a very dynamic and vibrant place. It's well connected with many bridges. You can see from one side of the shore to the other, and oftentimes there are activities on both sides or on the river sheet itself that make that area a very vibrant place. We would like to understand other parts of our rivers as river rooms. So for instance, down at the west end and on the south shore of the Confluence River Room, how can we activate both sides of the rivers there so that it feels like a room that we can partake in on the river or on either sides of the shore and understand it as a place. Same thing with the Allegheny River Room. How can we activate both sides of the river and make that river sheet, the water sheet there, a very vibrant place where people think of it as the kind of piazza, the living room, the front, the kind of front lawn of these two neighborhoods, the Strip District and the River Avenue District. Likewise, the south side is a little more challenged because a part of that area on the north side of the Monongahela River is a highway, but we believe that we can activate both sides of that river to make the Monongahela River Room more vibrant. So river rooms are places to come together to enjoy activities near to, next to, and on the rivers. And we'll be sharing with you some large scale and small scale improvements of places and activities, connections that need to be made along the river, and landside and waterside amenities and services. So the Confluence River Room we'll be speaking about, the Allegheny River Room, and the Monongahela River Room. Also sharing with you what we feel are essential projects in each of those river rooms. And these are the big lifts. There's lots of work to be done and lots of need for many people to assist with it. But these projects are large projects that need to be thought of long-term. And so Riverlife is committed to seeing these projects through. So let's take on the Allegheny River Room. The Allegheny River Room extends just east of the Convention Center all the way up to the 31st Street Bridge and the tip of Washington's Landing. And it has an area called the River Avenue Corridor, the Strip District, and then Washington's Landing is its own separate segment. Within the Allegheny River Room, there are a plethora of projects, and I'll just share a few. For instance, we know that there have been landings planned along the Strip District at the end of certain streets, and there's a great need for riverbank restoration in that area. And Riverlife is prepared to advocate for and to ensure that those get completed in a way that really adds to a system, a river system in the Strip. Likewise, River Avenue has a contiguous trail, but doesn't go very deep into the neighborhood. And I'll share a little bit about some ideas about the priorities to go connect to the neighborhoods that are behind the River Avenue district. At the other end of River Avenue is a trailhead possibility and potential for additional bridges to bring people onto Washington's Landing and really make that place, which already has a lot of great assets, into a true destination that isn't just on one side of the river, isn't just on Washington's Landing, but is really on both sides of the channel back there. And lastly, I'll spend some time on City Landing Park. So on the boards, a little bit about River Avenue Trailhead. There is a bridge there that exists, and it would be fantastic for the connectivity to be continuous past the loop out to neighborhoods like Sharpsburg and Etna and Millville who have or are developing riverfronts, and to ensure that the loop is connected to the region and beyond when it's as a destination and as an origin point. Another place that's on the boards is the River Avenue District. On the boards, meaning we're thinking about ideas and sharing those with you now, but there's still a chance for input, and we'll hope you give that to us today. I'll walk you through what's in this area in case you're not familiar. The Strip District is on one side of the river, Troy Hill, Spring Garden, and Washington's Landing on the other. And we know that there's going to be development or has been recent development on both sides of the river here. We know that things are well connected with trails. In some cases, the trail ends, and we'd like to see that change. But on the north shore of the river, it's continuous. And that there is a sense of a kind of park and green space. So in addition to a trailhead and such, we're thinking about green streets that connect back to the neighborhoods. So connecting back to the neighborhoods means creating river landings that are destinations to enter the river system. Advocating for things like river uses, like a river district cafe in that area, as well as amplifying and improving pedestrian connections, whether they're street connections or pedestrian-only bridges that already cross the highway, to make sure that the neighborhoods of Troy Hill and East Allegheny and Spring Garden can get to the rivers safely and pleasantly. And of course, connecting to institutions like the Sarah Hines House that already has a captive audience, if you will, of students and families who should connect to the rivers. So, one of the foci in this is to look at the way you move through this area. What's that threshold at the railroad underpass, and how we might improve that underpass to make it a more pleasant experience. The big project that's on the boards for the Allegheny River Rim is the City Landing Park. A little background on the Strip District as to how we're thinking about this. As you know, there are many neighborhoods that look onto the Strip District area, from Troy Hill to the Hill District that look down to it, Polish Hill, and then other neighborhoods like downtown in Lawrenceville and Washington's Landing that connect to it directly. We know that there's a lot of development on both sides of the river that has occurred or will be occurring. And we know that the neighborhood's very well connected to public transit as a major thoroughfare between the East End and downtown, and also on the busway, potentially with a future stop. There are great assets on the water already, and we want to connect those and make sure that they're continuous. And this is also the beginning of the Green Boulevard that should extend through to Lawrenceville and communities to the east. So we would like to see a big move, and the big move is on the city tow pound lot near the 31st Street Bridge. The big move is to create a public park that provides much needed green space for the Strip District. A park that brings life to the site with complementary development, such as affordable housing and mixed uses, so that people are there as well as a park. And plan for unique activities both on and off the river so that this becomes a destination on the loop. So we know that the city tow pound lot is ripe for change. It for years has been talked about as needing to be repositioned, and is a priority of the city to do so. So Riverlife is assisting in imagining the future of the site, and this is the beginning of that process. So what we're sharing today are some thoughts as to what the river system could use on this site, as well as some of the feedback that we've received from folks who are thinking about what the Strip needs, what the region needs, and what this site can hold. So the vision is for a park with many different types of activities and amenities, and I'll walk you through some of those. There's residential possibilities or commercial possibilities, and there are also a series of smaller spaces. It's a fairly large site, and so we can have many different activities that occur on this site. For instance, we need to be anchoring this with some sort of development that could include affordable housing, as well as ground floor spaces that serve the strip and the residents and the park visitors. There should be some sort of active commercial space like a cafe or a kiosk that brings people to the river, but also encourages people to come off of the river and into the park and to engage in river-oriented uh, activities, convenience, picking up food, drink, etc. A real destination. There should be places to play under the bridge, places to have unique experiences, as well as places to stay, movies or otherwise. There should be outdoor rooms like these that are quiet, or places to gather in small groups to enjoy trees and shade and views of the river and to evolve with the seasons. Of course, it's very important that we have the connectivity to the other side of the river and a new ramp that gets you to this site directly without having to go all the way out to Penn Avenue and come back, would give us a chance to have a flyover view of things like the skate park, or and also land in a forest to come down in a dramatic area that's treed and forested and away from the river experience itself. And large areas for active and passive play. What exactly ends up here kind of depends on the next stages of the process, but it could be things that are river oriented, things you might see with water, such as beach volleyball, or places like lawns in order to take a nap. Not many places you can do that on the riverfront, and so this would be unique. Of course, there would probably be a dog park, in case you're wondering. Lastly, there are different ways to engage the river, active and passive. I think for many people have been talking about for years the opportunities to be able to get on the river and swim, maybe not in the river, but on the river. And so this would be a great place to have a public mooring for a seasonal amenity like a swim barge. So moving forward, Riverlife is going to advocate for mixed use, mixed income, public space, river access, a connection to the bridge, and a sense of place and accessible to all. And in the future, the process will ensure that everyone can be involved in helping to determine what goes on this site, as well as to help make it happen. The Monongahela River Room. The Monongahela River Room extends from the Liberty Bridge all the way up to the Hot Metal Bridge and includes areas on the south side as well as the 2nd Avenue corridor. The improvements that come in this area include things like a connector to connect the neighborhoods of the Hill District, Uptown, and Oakland to the river. They're very close, but have a difficult time getting there. And this would be a way to get them to the river easier. Another focus area to think about is a park extension and a bridge connection at 10th Street that would make it easier and safer to get on and off the riverfront trail because the neighborhood is separated from the trail by the railroad. Another thing that's important up and down our rivers, but especially important here, is riverbank restoration. And so this area, while it might not be visible from those using the trail, will have a healthier ecological footprint at the end. And lastly, I'll spend some time on the High Line, just telling you a little bit about some path reconfiguration and the restoration of the landing. So on the boards, just thinking about things that are happening already, different plans and different partners have been talking about connecting the Hill, Uptown, and Oakland to the river, and it's written into plans like PWSA's planning, as well as the Uptown Eco Innovation District, to safely get pedestrians, bicyclists, and others from the neighborhoods down to the rivers through that spaghetti of highways. So Riverlife is prepared to advocate for, support, and partner when needed to make this happen. It's great to see things that are already on the boards, and part of Riverlife's goal is to make sure that those things occur. The project that Riverlife is going to take leadership on in this river room is this High Line path and landing restoration. the background on this area is, of course, the Southside Flats is a very large and very dynamic neighborhood. We know that there is development that has occurred recently or will be occurring, including investment in the lower right-hand corner of this image in the High Line and in Station Square. We know that there are great parks nearby, that there is great public transit in the south side, as well as a vibrant corridors on both sides of the river. And that things like a proposed park extension could connect Southside Riverfront Park with a contiguous and cared for experience all the way down to areas near the High Line and Station Square. Connect people back to the Carson Street Business District, and add connections like the proposed 10th Street connection from the 10th Street Bridge. So we're looking at in this area, the High Line is a large structure that was recently renovated. And because of the railroad circumstance in this area, the trail actually comes off and around the High Line and the adjacent businesses. Riverlife would like to see that trail move all the way through the site, which involves working with partners, business partners, property owners, as well as the railroads and the city to see how we can squeeze a pathway through this area. And so a couple years ago, the site, not too long ago, the site looked like this. It has since been renovated into something more like this. And much of this landscape exists, although not all of it. And so included in this project are a couple things. One is building on the investment that's been made, the rejuvenation of a trailhead, and also allowing folks like Friends of the Riverfront who did a kayak landing there, giving an opportunity to maybe have some more partners who are interested in expanding that into a dock or other facility to complement the High Line's work there. Another area is the area underneath the concrete plant, where we know if we're going to get through there, we need to be safe. And so the opportunity for artistic installations in order to celebrate moving through that space, but also to make sure that folks are safe and that things that we can coexist with the industrial uses that are on the river as well. The Confluence River Room. The Confluence River Room is a large room, and it also has a lot of work to do. It consists of areas on the North Shore, near the West End, which we call the West End Bridge Gap, which is on both sides of the river. Station Square, which has been improved in the past, and the Golden Triangle downtown. Some of the projects that might happen in this area include things like the Allegheny Landing renovation, which Riverlife is already engaged in. This will rejuvenate the landside and waterside areas of that, which was one of the first riverfront redevelopment projects in the city and has naturally kind of aged with time. So we should see some exciting things happening in this season and the next seasons as that goes under renovation. The Mon Wharf Cap and Park is a project that contains both things that are somewhat easy to do, like putting some activities on the Mon Wharf to make it a destination and make it possible perhaps to have direct access to the river, but also long-term things like, is it possible for us to bridge the highway partially in that area to present a new front door to the First Side properties and to get people to come to the river and give them an interim green space on their pathways to the river. The Station Square landing has much opportunity, and people are already thinking about that, whether it's looking at how we rejuvenate and get people down to the docks that exist already and those docks themselves, to connecting people from the trail to the assets like the Mon Incline, which leads us to this idea of a Mount Washington neighborhood loop. Right now, if you came to the city as a first day visitor for the first time and you had something you wanted to do, coming up to the Mon Incline or the Duquesne Incline is not easy, and walking along the river to get from one to the other would be not your most pleasant experience. We'd like to see the Mount Washington neighborhood loop on the ticket as a first day experience where visitors can come and connect easily and safely to the inclines, that the experience at the top of the bottom of the inclines is well done, and that the experience along the river is continuous and pleasant so that people get the best opportunity to see our downtown from the other side of the river. The big project here is the Manchester Chateau Connector and Sawmill Run Park, which I'll spend more time on. On the boards. If you haven't been to this place, it's not a surprise. Not many people go to this place. This is the loop's most remote location. And if you don't know what Sawmill Run is, or you've never seen it in this location, that's because it's at the bottom of this concrete channel. So not many people have seen this either. It's difficult, it's possible, but it's difficult to get to the river from either ends of the bridge, whether it's because of steps or because of fences that prevent you from actually reaching it. And it's fairly inhospitable. It's a working riverfront right now. In some cases, parts of it are abandoned or underutilized. And so it's a real opportunity. So what this looks like, if you see it from the air, is that there are neighborhoods like Mount Washington, Duquesne Heights, West End, Elliott, Chateau on both sides of the river. And there are properties that are either slated for some sort of development or have been discussed as possibly changing. There is transportation nearby, but it's not used to stopping here. So that would be something that we would need to change if we make destinations in this area. And so a proposed Sawmill Run Park at the south end of the West End Bridge and a proposed park and destination at the north end of the bridge are things that are underway in this thinking. So if you've ever gotten on to the West End Bridge, it's tough, but it's definitely worth it. And this is the area and the experience that we want to focus on. This is the view looking west, and of course the iconic view looking east are important things to think about. So Sawmill Run Park. The big moves for Sawmill Run Park are to celebrate the West End Bridge, to light it, to make that incredible piece of bridge architecture into a focus more than it is now. To create Sawmill Run as a gateway park and a portal catalyzing the future trail connections to the west of the city that don't exist today. To create an accessible route from the West End Bridge to this Sawmill Run Park, and to improve walk and bike access to and from the West End. So if you ever have a chance to drive through the West End Circle, what used to be the West End Circle, you will see that Sawmill Run is there, but it is not easy to get there from here, and it is a rather confusing intersection. In order to get there, PennDOT did put in some walkways, so they do exist, but it's not intuitive and it's not particularly inviting. So the experience that we're focusing on is how do we get people to this location from the West End? And then when they get there, how do they get onto the bridge? How do they get down to the river? So right now, these areas in orange are fairly narrow and red is very narrow, not too hospitable for bikes or for pedestrians. And we know that there are pathways moving through the site, whether a trail to downtown or the trails to the West End. So focusing on the east side of the bridge, could we create overlooks and a bridge deck expansion that widens it for pedestrians, strollers, wheelchairs, bikers, and get an accessible path to ground level so that you can get easily with wheels from the bridge deck down to the river, and an accessible path to the river. So that things like this, which is the narrowest part of that bridge deck, could be passable by many and invite people to stay there. And places like this, which is the pier on the bridge before you enter the large arch, might be destinations in themselves where we go to see the city, but when you're in the city looking back towards the bridge, might be lit or otherwise articulated as a part of the beautiful architecture of the bridge itself. And we had fun imagining what places like this could become when you start to put people and trails and overhead, ramps in it, and looking at how that might configure itself with things like public docks, a trailhead and a public plaza, maybe a cafe or some sort of trailhead amenity. How might we get below grade, below the railroad to get to the docks? And then a riverside park area in a place that Alcosan is slated to be working in the future, and we know likely will need some repair. Would be great to see it repaired to an ecologically healthy state. Up at the bridge deck level, widening that deck, getting people to this ramp, the red ramp to ground level, and expanding that sidewalk area is all part of connecting to Manchester, connecting to the West End, and making it a better experience. A little bit bigger view of that, really just making sure that we're capturing all of the different pathways that move through this site. So that this kind of view, which is pretty spectacular and is evidence of a working riverfront, we still want to maintain a working riverfront where necessary, but in places like this, it's possible that it could be also open to the public. And so we can navigate the kind of dynamic nature of our riverfronts with decks that look out over the railroad, with docks that are on the river, and with amenities that connect people and attract people to places that right now we don't really think about as being connected to the river at all. At the other end of the bridge is the Manchester Chateau connector. And the big moves here are celebrating the West End Bridge again. The bridge is fantastic, creating a multi-use gateway park for Manchester and other neighborhoods as a portal to the trail, and connecting a pleasant and creating a pleasant and accessible route from Manchester to the Portal Park. So this is what that looks like. Again, highways separating neighborhoods from the rivers, and we can still see a little bit of the old grid in this view. If you haven't been here, this part of the river has a trail and it's in pretty decent condition. There are a lot of people that use it in many different types of weather. And so we know we have activity down in this area and that we can build on that. There are places where, while it is possible to connect through, it's not that pleasant and also perhaps not that safe in some places. The bridge, when it was improved, does have some assets, some ramping and some under bridge connector pieces that we will definitely take advantage of, but making that connection stronger from here down to the river. And to improve things that sometimes when people don't use them too much, don't get cared for as they should. And lastly, when you see underneath the bridge down to the river, it includes a pretty spectacular place that could be so much more in terms of connecting people to the river, access and amenities for the river, and really bringing the river up to the neighborhood. So on the upper deck, or excuse me, we know that we have the corridor, the existing trail. And we would like to, the big idea here is to create a continuous direct connection from Manchester to the river. To put gateways and little thresholds so that it's not a long kind of tube that delivers you to the river, but it's a series of small places that you pass through to get there. And to expand some of the ramps in order to make it possible for bikes, strollers, and wheelchairs to make that passage. And to really connect the green space so that it is a park that is moving towards the neighborhood and not just a tenuous trail that connects to remote green spaces. So we imagine that places that look like this today could be far more pleasant places in the future as a trailhead, as a safe passage space. As well as thinking about the underbridge, and this is a concept for an underbridge park. Right now there's these supports for the bridge, If the red area comes through, this is the direct connection from Manchester to the river and could be celebrated, as well as greened up with a park that is continuous and a trailhead amenities that make this a destination for the neighborhood as well as others. So that a place that looks like this today might have this kind of artistic way of thinking about a bridge that is supported and suspended above the ground plane, so the ground plane can be active as a park, safely delivers people down to the riverfront, and itself becomes a destination, a kind of attraction on that loop, one of the gems that is then a place to visit for the neighborhood, for visitors and others, inspiring adjacent property owners to invest in their properties and to make this a true public space. So that's the last big idea we want to share with you today, but there are many, many more ideas that are going to be in the final report. And I know that Matt is excited and that Matt and his team are excited to have you be a part of that process. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Matt.
Wow, that's a lot. Thank you so much, Christine. That's great content. Plenty of reason to be excited about the future of our work in the riverfronts. And as we push this movement forward, you can trust that we'll be working tirelessly to create a world-class experience, connecting Pittsburgh's neighborhoods to the rivers and connecting people to nature, to riverfront programs and activities, and to great riverfront places. There are many ways for folks to share in this movement, and we hope that you will stay in the loop with Riverlife, pardon the pun. This can be done in a variety of ways. Provide your feedback through the post-meeting survey. This little QR code here will take you right to the survey. Sign up for Riverlife's newsletter. Great information in our newsletter about what's happening out there and what we're doing. Sign up for a Completing the Loop bike tour or virtual walking tour later this year. Make a contribution to Riverlife meaningful to you to support these efforts. Participate in a Completing the Loop focus group, and then becoming an informal ambassador. Feel free to share this recording of this webinar with your friends and family, directing them to this website, riverlifepgh.org/loop. All meaningful ways that we can share in this movement. So with that, thank you to Evolve for their work with us in this important effort, and a hearty and sincere message of gratitude to all of you for your continued investment in this movement, time, resources, insight, leadership. It is an incredible privilege to lead these efforts with you, and we look forward to sharing in transformational success along our riverfronts. Now, please stick around for our questions and answers as we move this process forward. The marvels of technology. Okay, we're back. This is great. So much to digest here, so much great content, so much inspiration. Thank you, Christine, for you and your team partnering on this with us. We're going to move to question and answer portion. And so we're joined by Claudia Saladin with Evolve and Riverlife's own Anna Leischer, who are queuing up questions from participants in the chat and from our participants on Facebook Live. I think I'll actually take the first opportunity to ask a question since I've got the microphone here. Christine, you've spent the better part of a year working with us and probably tiring of us, to analyze and recommend transformative investments and improvements to our experience along the rivers. And so I guess what element or elements do you find to be the most exciting?
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt. I think that in the original plan, there were a lot of great ideas and great places, and many of those great places came to be, and they gave us a reason to come down to the rivers. The thing that excites me most about this plan in the next 20 years of Riverlife, let's say, is that, just the way water used to flow down to the rivers, I think that the ideas of bringing the neighborhoods down to the rivers and the rivers up to the neighborhoods, I think that, undoing the blockages of parking lots and highways and other impediments, fences where you can almost see the river, but you just can't get there. I think is like, that's an easy one, but there are, many bigger challenges that we need to overcome. And I think that the emphasis on giving people access to the river, giving neighborhoods an address on the river, and really can making Pittsburgh a river town, not just a river front, really making it a part of our identity, I think is a really important and powerful part of this plan. What about you, Matt?
Good answer.
You've been thinking about this for a long time. What do you think?
I'm excited about a bunch of stuff, but I'll say I think there is a leveraging of this moment. There are seismic investments being made from private developers. We know that along the riverfronts. The riverfront does not look the way it did 20 years ago. So leveraging those moments, there are seismic investments being made by our public partners too. We know Alcosan through their clean water plan is planning $2 billion. That's a seismic investment in water quality, which will impact the riverfront experience. And we are positioned, I think, pretty well to inform their processes, to leverage those processes. I'm also excited about the approach to our work. I mean, we talked about mission, vision, and values at the outset, about the shift with really putting people and neighborhoods at the center. And I'm pretty proud of the equity of our process as an example of that. Through this process, we sought out as many voices as possible to design this element of our vision. And I think that's evidenced by our community process over the past 6 months, but also this meeting itself that we're having tonight, this conversation. So this is the first step. And I think we need to show that we are deeply committed to community engagement. But each project's going to have that challenge to it. And I'm really excited about entering this work in that way. So thanks for the question.
What else do we have? What questions do we have here?
Hi, I'm Claudia Saladin. I'm a landscape architect and planner with Evolve Environment Architecture, and I've been doing a lot of the groundwork and working with the team to develop these recommendations. So for our first question, I'm going to send this to Matt. We have a question from David that says, "I'd like to see the city budget for maintenance of public areas like this. I've noticed a lot of places that were improved, but then not maintained. An example is the trail between the Strip District and the Convention Center."
So when I was welcomed at Riverlife as the new president and CEO, one of the challenges that was laid before me was, under your administration, Matt, with this organization, you're going to have to solve for care and maintenance. It needs to happen. We know that there are huge challenges with that. But I think we, as a complementary part of this process, have engaged Fourth Economy, which is a national consulting firm. They're actually located in Chateau, to do an entire scan of the loop area. In fact, taking the data that we'd collected from the scorecard process related to maintenance and evaluate that. We interviewed 50% of the property owners who control the loop. So we know a lot about care and maintenance in the district. I can tell you that without spilling any secrets, there's about $1.1 million being spent right now in the 1,000+ acres and 15 miles of riverfront. We know that is, and this is actually a surprising number, about $500,000 less per year that needs to be spent on riverfront care and maintenance. We didn't know that data beforehand. We know that the city controls about 17% of that real estate. That includes park spaces, that includes trails that they own, as well as sort of woodland areas between the trail and the water sheet. So we know a lot. I think our efforts moving forward through this process, but also with our team at Fourth Economy, is to create a sort of multifaceted approach to care and maintenance. Really, because it's 180 parcels owned by a bunch of different property owners, and so It can't be sort of the same care and maintenance program you might have if you were to control a park, right? A single park. It's a lot of different parcels. And so I am actually quite optimistic about our ability to create sort of tranches of care and maintenance for the riverfront loop moving forward, and look forward to sharing that as we move forward. But I can tell you, you're not the only person who has shared significant concerns about the experience not being world-class because of the care and maintenance. And I know if folks have been out there over the last week or several weeks, you know, the ice situation on the trails has been pretty treacherous. And so, you know, we look forward to working with our nonprofit partners like Friends of the Riverfront, with the city, with our philanthropic partners, with our private property owners, to really create a solution that is unique to Pittsburgh. So thanks for asking that question. That's a good one.
Hi, Anna Leischer, Planning and Project Manager with Riverlife here. I'm very excited to be here and in this moment of the planning process. I have a fun question from Belinda. Why should it be called a loop? Would it be much better if we used completing the heart, as the inside of the point is right at the true point of the city, and we love the rivers. We are lucky to have this unique shape at the confluence of the three rivers.
Belinda, we're on the same page. We've called it a wishbone. We've called it a heart. You should know that from the outset of this process, one of the things that we had really thought about doing was a sort of naming of the loop. Know that there's a significant history with this geography and considerable effort put into defining this area as Three Rivers Park. And we had thought that we might be able to make the renaming of this part of the city part of this completing the loop process. What we quickly found was that process alone really needs to be carefully done. You know, this is part of a movement that we're a part of, but there are a lot of partners, as evidenced by the number of folks on this call. And we really want to be careful about what that sort of brand is. And so moving forward, one of the recommendations is that we do work with our partners at the city and the Friends of the Riverfront and the public to inform that naming. So know that we've logged it as something, and we appreciate the feedback on this, because our hope is that it will be something that we all can sort of own as the center of our community. So thanks. Good question.
All right. And the next question is from Emily, and it's about the 31st Street City Landing Park site. Is there already a plan to move city environmental services to another location?
Yeah, so the city, and that's probably a question best directed to the city. The city has considered a number of locations for where the environmental service trucks, storage, and service could go. And we are working with them to figure out the best location for that. They will lead that. But you know, our job is to think about what the next chapter for this site is. But I don't think, Christine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's a definitive location that the city has set up. They do know and have acknowledged for years now that this site is better situated as a contributing public space. And right now, as you know, it's a pretty insular experience over there. So, good question.
I have a question from Dale. When will the connection be made from the Mon Wharf to Point State Park? The ramp and the pinch point at the top of the ramp needs to go. Dale,
you're speaking my language here. So this is what we call the cattle chute. This is a small little area that connects Point State Park to the Mon Wharf. And for years, we've spent time advocating for this site and putting resources into it. So Riverlife spent about $215,000 to create a design for that connector. We handed that design off to the owners of the property, in this case, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which controls Point State Park. I am proud to say and happy to say that we just checked in with DCNR about this. Their plan is to do groundbreaking on that site this spring. They are in final bidding for that project. So we anticipate that happening this year. And so when we think about the gaps that exist in the system, this is a key one for sure. It's the last piece of the Great Allegheny Passage. So we feel like this is a bit of a low-hanging fruit and something that we've been involved with for years. But I think 2021 will be the year where we see that project commencing, which is super exciting. So there'll be more updates between us and Friends of the Riverfront and others about temporary detours and announcements related to groundbreaking. So good question. Exciting one.
All right, next question I'm going to send to Christine. Christopher asks, on the West End Bridge, would it be possible to have a pedestrian walkway overlooks below the main bridge deck instead of at the same level as the cars?
That's a great question, Christopher. And right now, where we are is we've been looking at the past plans that have been done. Some of the past plans that have been done did put a deck below the bridge deck. We are not able to say whether that's possible or not, but knowing that PennDOT is going to be doing state of good repair on that bridge, Riverlife is putting together a team with some engineers who can say what is possible to do on that bridge and how might we work with PennDOT to accomplish some of those things. A couple conditions that have changed since those earlier plans were done is the railroad started double stacking cars. And so some of that ability to go below the bridge deck now is lost because you have to get up high enough above the railroad. Another thing that was of concern is that the arch part doesn't have a lot, from what we understand, doesn't have a lot of excess capacity to support something that comes off of that deck. So that's what we're going to work with the engineers to understand. Is it possible to support something that's lower at the same level, apart, connected? And that's the next step. So the idea is that we're going to make it better, and we need to figure out exactly what is engineering, what's feasible with the engineering.
I have a question from Brian. A really great, innovative, thoughtful plans. How might we go about paying for them?
We're going to be passing the hat at the end of this session. This, like all Riverlife projects, right, that we've undertaken in the past, it is a complicated and often very generous capital stack that we must create. And oftentimes, Riverlife is a relatively small piece of a much larger pie. We, as part of this process, have been spending considerable time thinking about how we are going to be able to garner the resources necessary to do this. I will say that one of the tools that Riverlife has actually helped create is the waterfront development tax credit at the state level, which is a great tool for corporations seeking to invest in riverfront projects. The tax credit provides an 80% tax credit to corporations that donate resources to organizations like Riverlife, a designated waterfront development organization, to do capital projects. That doesn't solve for every single cost that we might need to incur on a project, but it's part of that capital stack. But good question. I think you can trust that it's going to be, each of these projects is going to have its unique budget that it requires, and the resources are going to be complicated, public, private, philanthropic resources that go into these. So it's a team effort.
Okay, our next question is from Walter. Is there a timeline for improvements for the work around the West End Bridge as a gateway to West Pittsburgh? And how much is in coordination with Domi's work relative to implementing these same routes on the Bike Plus plan? Those poor conditions in the photograph are the only way to access much of the west side of the city on foot.
When we started this process, and even before we started this process, we actually viewed the West End Bridge as a significant social equity issue. That the West End has been, as you all know who have been over there, has been cut off right? There is no accessible pathway to get from the West End Village and beyond to the West End Bridge and to economic development centers like the Station Square, or over to the North Shore where you have job centers and entertainment amenities. And so we are, that's why we've circled this site as a key, among the reasons why we've circled this site as a key piece for us to work on moving forward through that lens. I will say that we are in lockstep with our other partners on thinking through these, the larger regional plans. We just had a meeting last week 2 weeks ago with the Rails to Trails Alliance on their connection from Pittsburgh to Coriopolis and beyond. So DOMI is at that table, Bike Pittsburgh, Friends of the Riverfront, and other partners who are going to make that happen, including the Watershed Organization of South Pittsburgh. These are going to be team efforts, and trust that we're sharing notes as we're going through this process. Christine, I didn't know if you had anything to add on to that.
No, I think you got it. There's a lot of complexity there, and but there are moving parts that are going to move this thing forward in different ways. So just trying to stay out in front of it and get in front of the partners that will be taking action, whether it's Alcosan or PennDOT or whatever.
Thanks. From Martin, where can I find the plan for linking the Hill District to the trail?
Christine, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that one. There are two places. PW West State, in its first round of citywide planning, identified that there's work that needs to be done as a high priority shed to deliver water to the river and to stop overflows upstream, all the way up in the hill even. And so there was green infrastructure planned, and also some work recognizing that they don't own or control all of that area. The city in the Uptown Eco Innovation District also identified in that plan, you can find that on the city planning website, that should be a park and it should have a safe and accessible route. And so that's kind of a bookend of different different agencies that can contribute to making that happen. But there's a lot of complexity in that as well. There's a lot of landowners and a lot of highways to work around. So I think that those communities are committed and excited about making that happen. And I think with partners like Riverlife and other riverfront advocacy groups, that's a very real thing, coming to be a very real thing.
Our next question is from Mark. And Mark asks, I hear a lot of good things about the land around the rivers. However, river life also means boating, boats, and docking so that boaters can utilize these areas. I'm not hearing anything about how you are incorporating boaters into these plans.
I can take that one. It's a great question, Mark. And so I think a lot of people, because not, a fraction of our population are boat owners. A lot of people think about the rivers from the land side. And so one of the things in the final report that we're focusing on is the waterside experience, and knowing that some people, like myself, are approaching it from a kayak or a non-motorized boat, and others are approaching it from, pleasure craft motorized boats. And still others are approaching it from a working riverfront or, these large boats like, say, the Gateway Clipper. So we're trying to understand kind of how those different populations on the river use the river, how they work with folks who are fishing or who might be on the river bank, but also engaging the river itself, and to make sure that we have places, your experience in kayaking, you need places at certain distances, lest you get exhausted and not be able to get back to your origin point. Is very different than if you have a motor and you're going up and down the Pittsburgh Pool. So we're trying to understand what those different destinations are, the amenities that are needed there, and to include the waterside experience as well. But thanks for that question. And if you have ideas on that, Riverlife's going to be doing additional outreach and focus groups to understand that the waterside users experience. So.
And the survey component, I think, is a place. you have comments that you would like for us to immediately address, please put them there. I just want to say a little bit about the river rooms concept. That was intentionally designed so that we weren't just, and that the elegance of that, was such that we didn't want to think of just the river's edge on River Avenue and just the river's edge in the Strip District, that there's an interplay between those river's edges, and that's the water sheet, right? And there's so much that happens in that space that we need to be mindful of. I will say that historically, we've not taken that lens as an organization, right? We haven't thought, I think, in equal parts that way. And so, the final report will detail some of those pieces, but I think there is room to grow for sure. Good question.
I hope we have time to get to all of the questions. Folks, you might want to upvote questions, and we'll get to the ones that rise to the top. I do have a question from Chris. This is a lot of great, ambitious stuff. Where do you start? What helps you to prioritize the big projects?
Well, so this is part of that process, and we do want to make sure that the feedback from here really talks about what we have some bias related to priorities, but we want to make sure that that's informed or balanced by what we're hearing as part of this process. And so we've thrown a lot out at people, and there's a lot to respond to, but it'd be great to hear about what those priorities look like so that it can inform some of that sequencing. A lot of these projects, like the West End Bridge, we know what the timeline is, right? And so there's some queuing that we know we need to do right now. There's coordination among partners that we know we need to do right now. But there's a finite timeline on when those projects will commence and when they'll be completed. And so each project has their own pieces. Some are much more intensive now than and some are more process oriented. So it's a good question, but that's actually a key part of this meeting, is to better understand, hey, is this landing, and hey, what is landing as a priority, right?
Okay, the next question I'm gonna send to Christine. Heather asks, are you considering resiliency and adaptation in the design and construction of these areas, knowing the extreme weather events and flooding we've seen in the area over the past several years?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Anything that we put on or in our rivers, beside our rivers, is always subject to the normal ebbs and flows of the seasons. But we know we've seen some pretty extreme events in the past years. And so we're really looking to things that are able to withstand or augment the natural systems there to improve it. And so I'll give you, for instance, the Army Corps of Engineers did a study along the North Shore for how to deal with naturalizing the banks and dealing with invasive species, et cetera, et cetera. Those types of things, if they were to be implemented and they costed it out and everything, certainly go a long way towards bank stabilization, ecological restoration, and dealing with flooding issues in a kind of sustainable, self-repairable way. So we want to build on those types of things. We know riverbank stabilization is an issue up and down the river, and that property owners are going to have to deal with that. So we'd like to have a set of kind of best practices that they can use to both be sustainable in these big events, but also actually improve the ecology and make that riverbank better. That's one way. Another way is that we're thinking about how water, in this case, is being delivered in those storms down to the river, where we're dealing with stormwater overflows coming out of the combined sewer system, where we have streams that actually come out, like at Sawmill Run, and how what we do down at the river can be resilient in those big events, and also get us to recognize that we actually have some natural systems there that could use some improvement. So some of those solutions are kind of technical in nature, and some of them are saying, if we're going to be developing a site or investing in a site, let's make sure that we're investing in the breadth of possibilities that could happen given the kinds of weather swings that we're seeing in climate change.
And I can just say anecdotally, as an organization, we have firsthand knowledge of what climate change can do to signature investments that we've made. For those who are familiar with Allegheny Landing on the North Shore, 2018, we had a dock that we'd invested in, that we'd created in the park, that was destroyed by a catastrophic ice flow event. 2 years later, we're raising funds to do a dock resiliency plan and project that Anna is leading. That costs a lot of money. And so moving forward, we need to make sure that our infrastructure, as an example, is as resilient as possible. Because we know the frequency of these events is going to increase.
Thank you. Next, I have a question from Jim. Why not create an Allegheny riverfront room starting at the giant empty area just west of the 62nd Street Bridge, right on the Allegheny River? It's been empty for a long, long time.
Yeah, that is a very good question. And I think we both can probably take this one. Our planning process, and this conversation tonight, just so that we're clear, is about completing the loop up to the 31st Street Bridge on the Allegheny River. This is about us completing our promise that we made 20 years ago related to the original vision, okay, of the riverfronts. We know that we have a responsibility to expand the loop, that there are neighborhoods like Manchester, like the West End, like Hazelwood, and Lawrenceville, that have a strong desire to have a really strong riverfront experience and a connection to the regional network. And so, a complement to this completing and enhancing the loop is this other goal that we have, which is expanding the loop. And so we really wanted to focus on the key interventions for the existing area, but know that our work with our partners in Lawrenceville, in fact, the executive director of the Lawrenceville Corporation was a part of this process. We really view ourselves working on the expanding the loop hand in glove with leadership in Lawrenceville to deal with that section, right, from 31st Street Bridge all the way up to the city line, right? But in the case of that neighborhood, the 62nd Street Bridge. So it's not that we're not thinking about it, it's just not articulated in this plan. Is that another room that runs from 31st to 62nd Street? That'll be an iterative process with our partners in Lawrenceville. But as somebody who worked in Lawrenceville for 9 years, I have a special interest in personal interest in seeing that connection made, and really building that room to include both sides of the river, right? So you have the Triborough Eco District on the other side. That those relationships, I think, should be meshed. So good question.
Yeah. Matt, if I can just build on that, is to say that just because Riverlife has some boundaries, it's more of a focus area than it is a boundary, because in the course of the process of looking at how people use rivers, we looked at how the tri-boroughs, how Sharpsburg uses their river, how Aspinwall's using their river, how all the way up to Heth's Run at the bottom of the zoo parking lot, how Braddock uses their rivers. And there's a hunger in all these communities to get to the river or expand their riverfronts. And we know that this is important regionally. I think Riverlife is focusing on areas that it's committed to in the past to complete those areas, and then look to things that seem doable, but that need is there, and that there are many partners doing great work there. And I know that we had a question about somebody from Duquesne, but we feel you, Mon Valley, we feel you. But I think that there is a focus regionally now on the equity of bringing these communities back to their rivers, and hopefully will be part of sparking a larger conversation. So.
Another question we have from Thomas is, are there any fundraising events being planned to be specifically dedicated to providing funding towards the goals, both big and small, that are included in the loop?
Wow, Stefan, that queued up for you. So each year we do Party at the Pier, which is our signature fundraiser that will be this year in late August, COVID permitting. That is a great opportunity to support our work through a fabulous, elegant, opulent event that we love. We will be entering our 11th or 12th year of Party at the Pier. We are doing a small ticketed event in October, and we'll be sharing more information about that. I'm not free to disclose that just yet, but these are great opportunities for event-based fundraising. We also, wasn't expecting this question. We actually started a monthly donor program on our website, and we'll be rolling that out in April, which will be a sustained giving program at all levels. And we're excited about that because we know there is a palpable interest for folks to, to be a part of this movement. And so we've designed this program to really respond to folks who want to support our efforts on a continuing basis. So, and as we move forward with these initiatives, there's likely to be a capital attraction strategy that we undertake that has a substantial individual component to it. And I would be looking for information about that as we get on with the implementation. So good question. Thank you.
I think we have time for just a couple more questions. I have a question from Dean. Is there any possibility to create a riverfront destination for dining and shopping? The addition of the occasional cafe every mile or two is a great start, but more density of all-weather retail might be more of a draw. Popular one.
You want me to take that one, Matt?
That would be great. Do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So we love that idea, and we have looked at places where that's possible. And in many of the places that we'd like to see it, we are doubled up against the floodplain issues. And so we're looking in the report to understand where we can get more than just one or two things close to the river, but where there could be a little bit of a district. A lot of the development that's happening, I think that those property owners would also like that, but oftentimes are somewhat limited as to what you can put down on the river. So we are working on that. It's a great idea, and hopefully we'll identify a few places where that can happen.
Do we have time for one more?
I'll be here all night. Yeah, we can go all night. That's fine.
Let's see. So one question that we had from Jonathan is, will any of these proposed projects include infrastructure to mitigate stormwater runoff?
Sure, I can take that one. Yep, it's a little bit of a similar answer as the resiliency question. So in some cases, the riverfront is the point at which runoff is coming from much further upslope. And so we are thinking about where those combined sewers meet the river, how do we make those more palatable? And working with Alcosan as they're doing their tunnel work, and working with PWSA as they're doing their green stormwater infrastructure planning, trying to knit those two together. Green infrastructure has a different scale at the river's edge and has to respond to the ebbs and flows of the large body of water as much as it has to deal with the kind of runoff from the site itself. We're also blessed that the city has adopted the RIV as a zoning district, which has some pretty strong requirements for no paving, no parking, or requirements for stormwater runoff, green infrastructure in that riverfront district. So we are covered a little bit by that as well. So
that's a good question. Okay. Oh, we're at 7:31. Okay, so that. Wow, thank you so much. For questions that we weren't able to get to, we will do our best to answer those offline. I have two requests. For Riverlife is an organization that thrives on partnerships, and the folks on this call are partners in their own right. And so I'll ask again that folks serve as sort of informal ambassadors for this process. Share this with your friends, share this with your family, riverlifepgh.org/loop. And then make sure, if you're able to, fill out the post-meeting survey that was in the chat. It's just a really important part of this process to make sure that we're hitting the notes that we need to hit. And so with that, a hearty thank you to Christine Mondor, my partner in crime on this, for being my partner in crime. And thank you to everyone who has spent the last hour and a half and months before this engaged in this process. Thank you for bringing life to our movement and for carrying our message forward. We will see you next time for sure. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night and stay engaged.